Kia ora, I'm Nadine.Higgins and welcome to your personal finance podcast, The Prosperity Project. On this podcast, I'm on a mission to empower you financially. I am a columnist and a journalist, an investor, a financial advisor, and the mum of a toddler. But I do not claim to be the font of all knowledge. I'm still figuring it out too. And that's why I'll be bringing you the experts and mining their big brains for all the things you and I need to know every week. More than 3.3 million New Zealanders are in KiwiSaver, and we now have more than $110 billion invested. But too many of us are not making the most of the scheme. So today, we're going to get some guidance to ensure that you are. And joining us is finance expert, columnist and author Mary Holm, who has just revised and updated her 8th book, Rich Enough. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Nadine.
It's so lovely to be talking to you. I've been a long-time reader, first-time interviewer.
Oh, same. Yes.
What are some of the ways that we Kiwis who have signed up to KiwiSaver are getting it wrong?
Yeah, well, firstly, just not contributing. I mean, obviously, people sometimes have to take a break if they lose their job, although even then, perhaps they could still put $20 a week. It depends on the situation. $20 a week will get you the maximum government contribution. And so it's really good if people can keep doing that, or even $5 a week just to keep the habit rolling apart from anything else. But beyond those sort of situations, people, I think, take what used to be called a contributions holiday and is now called a saving suspension to make it sound a bit less appealing.
Like a holiday, yes.
Yes, yeah, and then not getting back into the contributing later. And
it's one of those things that maybe goes into the too hard basket or the life admin basket, and once they're out, they just don't get back in.
And possibly think it's quite a hassle to get back in, but it shouldn't be. It should be really easy to get back in. And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who's been around a while and did some retirement savings back in the 70s in America when I worked in journalism over there. That money that I then left in America has grown hugely. It's really wonderful for young people to get in and keep contributing. And by the time they get to retirement sort of age, it's huge. The growth is huge.
And that's what they mean by time is your greatest asset. You start young and you've just got decades for that money to compound and grow.
Exactly. And I mean, the young ones, a lot of them are going to retire with $1 million in KiwiSaver, especially if they go into the higher risk funds that tend to have higher returns. And we should know that $1 million then probably won't buy as much as it does now, but it's still going to buy a pretty nice retirement. So we want people to just be, if you have to take a little break, take it, but be really religious about getting right back into contributing.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the higher risk funds.
Yes.
Is that one of the other mistakes that we're making, that we're all a bit too nervy about taking on risk? We're not all that way. I mean, some people go into a high risk fund and then panic when the markets go down. And so if they really, really can't cope with that volatility, they shouldn't have been in that fund in the first place. But there are a lot of people who are the opposite. In particular, women. There's quite a lot of research to suggest that women tend to go into the lower risk investments and end up retiring with a lot less money because it makes a big, big difference over the years. The reason I laughed then is I think maybe you only know what your risk profile is when things are volatile. Because when it's all going up, you can say, great, take on lots of risk because it doesn't feel risky. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yes, I think so. I mean, in early 2020, when the markets really plunged, when COVID broke out, that was the first time for a lot of people that their KiwiSaver had gone down much. People who got in at the very beginning in 2007 or 8, they saw a big downturn because the global financial crisis happened around then. But first of all, quite a lot of people weren't in yet. And secondly, it was on a pretty small balance. People weren't all that interested at that stage. They might have a couple of $1,000 in KiwiSaver and it went down $500 and it's only $500. But by the time we got to 2020, for a lot of people, they saw the value dropping by thousands of dollars and panicking. And of course, as we all know now, the markets recovered remarkably quickly that time. They don't always so fast, but I mean, I was in my Herald column, I was continually saying to people, no, just stay put. And even if there is a downturn and you learn from that you can't cope with volatility as much as you thought you could, if you can just hang in there for a while, because markets that go down suddenly quite often recover quite fast. And then once things are sort of turned around again, if you really want at that point to move to lower risk because you can't cope with volatility, that's fine. But you're not allowed to then, when the markets start going back up again, I'm going to flick back into the high risk again. People that do that really do. There's a lot of data that shows that people that shift around like that end up with sometimes only about half as much money as people who just
because we just mistime it. We jump in after the markets have risen and we jump out when they're falling, after they've fallen.
That's right. It's absolutely awful what happens where people, they're buying at a high price and selling at a low price. And if you think about cars, if you buy a car at a high price and then sell it when the prices are low for that model, that's not good. It's just the same in KiwiSaver.
Do you think that the term high risk needs some workshopping by the marketing department to be something that doesn't sound so scary?
Yeah. That's a lot of people say, well, it's really volatility, it's not risk. And that's absolutely true. In a KiwiSaver fund, because they're all quite widely diversified, they own a lot of different shares or bonds or whatever, and so the value is not going to fall to zero. And when it goes down, it's almost certainly going to go back up again in time. It might take a few years, or it might take just a few months, but it will come back up. So it's not really risky. It's volatile. The trouble is, high volatility is a kind of, it doesn't flow off the tongue as easily.
Yeah.
And I think quite a lot of people might not even fully understand it's a little bit of a hard word, maybe, Nadine. Do you think?
Yeah, we perhaps need to find some other one. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, no.
I wonder whether, is one of the other mistakes that some of us are making is we're looking at our balance too often.
Yes.
I know people who have it on their mobile banking app.
Yes.
And so on any given day, they can tell you whether it's up, down or otherwise. But if we're looking at a 20 or 30-year investment on the daily, we're more likely to be worried by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's one reason why I'm not a huge fan of the bank KiwiSaver schemes. I mean, they're not bad, but they're not amongst the better schemes for the most part. But that problem too of people seeing their balance, it was fine while the markets kept growing. And, in the 10 or so years from about 2010 to 2020 before that COVID crash, there weren't many downturns at all. And I think people thought that's just the way it was always going to work. And so they look at their bank balance and it was a bit higher and it made them feel good. But then when it went down, that was, especially if it's on your bank app or something and you're seeing it every time you buy something or whatever, not a good idea. Mm-hmm. I think you can ask the banks. I think you can ask them not to have your balance come up like that. I think that'd be a good idea for people to, if they want to stick with their bank to.
If that helps them manage their personal feelings about risk or volatility, then perhaps that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
If you feel like you don't have the stomach for volatility, is there a way of just at least dipping your toe in and partially exposing your fund to more risk?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I think, well, nearly all the KiwiSaver providers let you be in more than one of their funds. And there are sort of two situations where people might want to do that. One is as you're approaching the time of spending the money, maybe on a home or maybe in retirement, then quite often you want to put some of the money you're the money you're planning to spend soon in low risk, and then the longer term money in a higher risk. But the other time is when you're thinking, I'd quite like to be brave and go into something that's a little bit more high risk, high volatile, that you can, if you're, I'm not sure I can cope. Because I reckon you should actually picture your balance to be radical, halving. I mean, there have been market crashes where the value of something like a KiwiSaver fund would have halved, and that's very rare. But I think in the 87 crash that probably happened. I mean, it's possible. And so if you had a KiwiSaver balance of 100,000 and you're moving into a higher risk fund, picture it going to 50, and it's great if you can cope with that, because just hang about and it'll come back up again. But if you really can't, that just sounds too grim, then perhaps put a quarter of your money into high risk and then see how that goes for a couple of years and get more transferred over. Now, last I talked to Simplicity, they were the one major provider that wasn't letting you be in more than one fund. But Sam Stubbs was saying, no, we're going to change that. So I'm not sure whether they have yet, but those of you who are in Simplicity and want to be in more than one fund, hassle them, because they're supposed to be getting on with it. Yeah.
So once you've figured out, you need to be in growth, aggressive, balanced, whatever it is, I guess the next step is to figure out, well, whose growth, aggressive, balanced fund should you be in?
Yeah.
How are we best to determine? Because there's many providers, and it can be a bit overwhelming.
It can. I think the major basis on which I would suggest you choose a provider is fees, which is controversial because people say, well, if you pay more for something, you tend to get something better. Not always, but you tend to when you're buying clothes or houses or whatever, pay more and get something better. But really, in managed funds, and including KiwiSaver, that doesn't necessarily happen. There's a lot of research to show that the low-fee ones can perform as well, if not better, after fees than the high-fee ones. And so I reckon it's good to just go with low fees. And the easy way to work out which funds charge low fees is to just go on the Sorted website on the Smart Investor tool, and it's a pretty neat tool for those who haven't explored it. You just click on KiwiSaver and then you can choose what risk level you want to look at, or you can look at all KiwiSaver funds, but it's easier really if you say, look, I'm in a balanced fund, click on balanced funds and rank them by fees. You can rank them by returns, you can rank them by quite a few different things, but rank them by fees lowest first. You can get fees highest first, fees lowest first, and then have a look at, say, half a dozen of the ones that charge the lowest fees and read about them. That website has got, if you click on the name of the particular fund, you get a good summary of information. It's not, screeds and screeds of it. It's what major investments they're in and how their returns are compared with other returns. A warning on that. People look and see that it hasn't had such good returns. Now, if it's had really bad returns relative to other funds in that risk level, I would perhaps give it a miss, but don't necessarily dismiss it because it's had only mediocre returns, because there's, once again, heaps of research to show the ones that did well in one period won't necessarily do well in the next period. So I think it's better to go with low fees and then one that's had reasonable sort of returns. The other thing you can look at is the services that the different KiwiSaver providers offer. And the Retirement Commission does surveys, annual surveys and asks all the providers, do you offer this, do you offer that? And they come up with a score for each provider on how good their services are. And you can find that on the KiwiSaver Fund Finder tool on Sorted. You can find out which one's got good services.
Yeah. And I would agree that tool is phenomenal. Yeah. And we should point out to people that Sorted is created by the Retirement Commission. So it's government funded. They're not trying to sell you anything. It's just good independent information. So head there. We'll put the link in the show notes. I want to talk to you some more about the mistakes we're making and the importance of fees. But we do have to take a quick break. Back after this. Welcome back to the Prosperity Project. We're talking to money expert Mary Holm about ensuring you're getting the best out of your KiwiSaver. And we started talking about fees, Mary.
Yes.
And I know that on the Sorted website that you can rank them from lowest to highest. But is it most important to look at the fees, or is it most important to look at the return after fees?
Yeah, I think look at the fees.
Yeah.
That does seem counterintuitive because you want to look at whichever one's doing well. The trouble is it's all past information. And as I was saying a minute ago, there's lots of research to show that funds that have done well in the past, in fact, are sort of less than average likely to do well in the future. There's a real tendency, the active fund managers which charge the higher fees tend to have a certain way of selecting investments, which quite often does well in one environment and not well in another environment. So really, honestly, and people find it quite hard to believe, it's a very good idea to ignore returns unless they're particularly bad.
Yeah, I think people would struggle to get their heads around the idea of ignoring returns when they're all ranked on this fund or that fund has achieved the best return. And we've got the Morningstar report that'll tell you who's done what over the past 5 years, 10 years. So what is the research that tells us that it really doesn't matter if they've done well in the past? It doesn't mean they're going to do well in the future.
By the way, on Morningstar, have a look and it says it says there, don't take much notice of the returns. It does say on their reports. But the research is mostly American, I have to admit, done by S&P, which runs the S&P 500 and, a huge, big American research firm. But there has been some done in New Zealand that shows the same sort of thing is happening here, where they look at, for example, the funds that have done best over, let's say, a 5-year period. How did they do in the following 5-year period? Or over 10 years, and how did they do in the following 10? Or whatever the period is. And very often, the ones that did well in one period, they tend to be less likely than by chance to do badly next time around. And the ones that did badly are quite likely to do well the next time around. It's really, it is hard to get your head around. But if you're doing, if you study finance, which I've done, I could explain it, but it's not a quick grab, really.
Yes, fair enough. And I know that there's plenty of debate over active funds versus passive funds. And I guess the lower fee ones tend to be the more passive funds. Is that to say that there's just really no benefit to some highly powered financial analyst who's paid lots and so therefore charges you lots going through and picking the investments?
Yeah, I think there is no benefit. I mean, that's perhaps a bit sweeping. And people always bring up Warren Buffett to me, when I'm saying you can't really pick shares. He and Charlie Munger have been exceptional. They are the exception that proves the rule. In fact, he himself, Warren Buffett, has said you should go into index funds. But generally speaking, when you look at the research, I've been following this for more decades than I care to mention, but when you look at people who are praised for being very good at selecting shares, and then suddenly next time around they don't do very well, it's just a common thing.
I actually underlined in your book a quote from Warren Buffett in his 2017 annual report where he says, "Performance comes, performance goes, fees never falter."
Yes.
Which I thought is quite poignant because maybe what people don't understand is you're not just charged fees if your fund grows, right?
No, that's right. Then people can get a bit upset by that sometimes if their balance goes down quite a lot and the fees just keep on coming along. But if you're realistic about it, you can't really expect the people who are running KiwiSaver funds to just get no or low income when the markets are down. That's not going to work for people. They're still doing the work. They're still running the funds, and many times it's not their fault that the markets have gone down.
It's just market conditions.
Yeah, COVID or something like that comes along, and you can't blame them for that.
Yeah, there's nowhere to run and hide in a situation like that. What about performance fees? Not all funds charge them, but some do, where if you achieve a certain amount above the benchmark that they'll charge you extra. Is that a waste of money?
It's... Yes, there's not that many do charge those anymore, I think, and they're not really, they can give the wrong incentives for the managers to go for short-term performance as against longer term, because they can take the money and run to South America. You can't, you're stuck in KiwiSaver over the decades. I mean, I know the FMA's looked into performance fees, and I don't think they're particularly impressed by the way it works. It's not. I wouldn't applaud a fund that charges performance fees.
I looked at the last FMA report, and it said that I think this is for the 2024 year, that we paid $789.6 million in fees.
Gosh,
do you think that we're just paying too much? Should there be a cap on what you can charge?
I prefer in these sort of situations to let the market do it, and
we should vote that with our feet then.
Yes, and move to the low fee ones, which is not only helping the market work better, but also helping you. And it's absolutely true that fees have gone down. And, the FMA has been monitoring that. And especially at the low end, it used to be that a 0.5% fee was low. And now there are quite a few providers offering, a fair bit, and sometimes quite a lot less than that. Yeah. So I think we just let the market work that one out.
Yeah. I think you've been quite definitive, though. We're looking for the lowest fee and not performance. And so I think if everyone thinks that way, I think we'll all drift in a certain direction, and surely the other fund managers will catch on.
Yeah, and there has been, was it BNZ? One of the big providers not long ago lowered their fees, tended to lower them across all their funds. Yeah, it's yes.
We've talked about the fees. We've talked about not necessarily getting hung up on the returns. Is there anything else you should consider when you're picking a provider?
Yeah, well, there's the whole issue of ethical investing, which has become more and more popular, and a lot more New Zealanders are taking an interest. When Mindful Money, which is the website I recommend on it, they got some great information on which KiwiSaver providers and which funds invest nicely as far as the environment goes, or social issues, or in fact that you can look at whether there's animal testing, all sorts of factors you can look at. And so have a look at the Mindful Money website. But when they do surveys, they find that, the majority of New Zealanders really care about the ethics of their investments, but a lot fewer people are actually translating that into choosing a KiwiSaver fund that is an ethically strong fund. But I think that's probably gradually changing, and it's certainly something. So on the Mindful Money website, have a look at a fund you're thinking of moving into, and you can specify which issues matter to you, and then see how that fund scores, and that might make you change your mind.
I'm keen to know whether there are other changes more broadly that you would like to see to how KiwiSaver works, because obviously there's only so much that we as investors can do within the scheme to maximise its value for us.
Yes.
For example, some people are on contracts that are total remuneration contracts. So your KiwiSaver contribution and the employer contribution comes out of your salary. And that's always struck me as not really being within the spirit of the legislation.
It's not cricket.
Agree? It's not cricket.
No, I really don't like people doing it. Tends to be big employers who do it, and they they say it's because they want to treat the people that are in KiwiSaver equally with the employees who are not in KiwiSaver. And I say that's pretty weak. We want there to be an incentive for people to be in KiwiSaver. We want the employees to want to be in it. And I know that, the Retirement Commission has for a long time said we should get rid of total remuneration, it's called. And I'd really like to see that gone.
And this is maybe a tricky one for those who find it difficult to find the 3%. But should we have higher minimum contributions?
I'm not particularly a fan of that. The people who are often in the industry, and you sort of think, they've got a bit of an incentive.
Because they can charge a fee based on how much is invested.
That's
so invest
right.
more, I earn more.
Yeah, and they say, no, Mary, that's not what I mean at all. I just think people aren't retiring with enough money. But actually, funnily enough, in my Weekend Herald column, every now and then there's a letter from someone who lives on New Zealand Super alone and is quite happy on it. I'm not saying everybody is, and I'm not saying that's good, but I don't think we don't need to retire with $500,000 in KiwiSaver. Most people don't. It's, if you can, well, that's nice, but it's not essential. I would rather see contributions made by the government to unemployed people. That's the change I would really like to see. Get them into the system. Don't take it out of their benefit because they're on pretty low money already. Just put 3% of their benefit in addition into a KiwiSaver fund for them, because then they are part of the system, and when they get off the benefit, they're already enrolled and things are rolling and they've got a stake in their future. And I just think psychologically it could make a big difference. And it doesn't cost that much. I know the Retirement Commission did the number crunching on it a while back, and it wasn't very expensive because the benefit's so low that 3% of the benefit is not that much money.
That's a really interesting concept. There's a million more things I would love to ask you, and perhaps we'll have to get you on another time, but we really appreciate your time, Mary Holm.
Thanks, Nadine. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Prosperity Project. You can follow this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and please do chuck us a rating or a review while you're there. For more personal finance and business content, head to nzherald.co.nz, and please do feel free to get in touch with your questions and your stories. nadine.higgins at nzme.co.nz. A reminder, though, that this podcast is informational only, and nothing we say here should be considered personalised financial advice. But also remember that while listening to this podcast is hopefully going to be additive to your financial knowledge, and that is fantastic, knowing stuff doesn't create change. Doing stuff does. So what action are you going to take today to make your life more prosperous? My producer for this episode is Ethan Sills. Sound engineer is Richard Martin. I'm Nadine Higgins. Thanks for listening to The Prosperity Project.